Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Designing Additional Space for Special Needs. Joining me today are four speakers, Mark Brown, TG Escapes Eco Buildings to Inspire, Kiran Hingorani, CEO of Swalcliffe Park School, Matthew Ellis, National Facilities Manager, Acorn Care and Education, and finally, Jayne Wilson, CEO of Petty Pool. Matthew, Kiran and Jayne will be joining me for facilitated Q&A after Mark's presentation. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, James, and good afternoon, everyone. I apologize for my green hue. I don't know what's happened there, but we're talking about green products, so perhaps it's appropriate. Before we get on to the Q&A, as James mentioned with Kiran, Jayne and Matt, I'm just going to run through a little bit of background to TG Escape's approach to buildings and specifically the relevance in special needs settings. So TG Escapes, we produce timber frame buildings throughout education for lots of different purposes. And what we believe and what our customers like is that natural building design like ours not only saves money, but can improve educational outcomes and well-being. And that's for a number of reasons. Firstly, biophilic design principles are proven to improve educational outcomes and also improve the well-being for staff and children. We find that timber and low stimulus with outdoor access suits children with special needs. Our customers like the fact that sustainable materials and the modular off-site manufacture process saves money and energy in construction, and energy savings through zero operational carbon buildings can be reinvested back into education. So first of all, just to talk a little bit about biophilic design principles. As I say, there's plenty of evidence to prove that these principles can improve educational outcomes and enhance the well-being for not just students, but staff as well. And it's because we all know a well-designed space really helps us feel great. We know this in our homes and in our workspaces. The space you're in really affects how you feel and how you perform. So eco buildings that blend in with their surroundings, following the principles of biophilic design, which is incorporating natural elements, providing easy access to the outdoors, using materials and textures that reflect those in nature, maximising the penetration exposure to natural light, providing a healthy level of air quality and views of the natural world outside, all help to produce a space which is conducive to learning and development. It's good for staff and student well-being, and it also helps encourage outdoor learning and environmental citizenship. And I'm going to, throughout this brief presentation, talk about some examples of research we do with our customers of these buildings in use and the impact it can have on these areas. So first off, just looking at how connecting with nature really can improve educational outcomes. So there's various research projects been done into this, and this is one amongst a large group of students that showed that just having larger windows can improve progress in maths and reading quite significantly. Another piece of research shows that higher natural views can improve test scores, higher graduation rates, more people planning to attend college, and fewer reports of criminal behaviour. And this is research from our customer feedback program. So this is not actually a special needs site. This is an early years setting in the south of England. And what the feedback here is that both children and staff love learning and working in the building due to the amount of natural light and space. Free flow access to the covered deck is a huge advantage, so that outdoor learning can take place in all weathers. This is another building that's been up now for about 10 years, I think, in the south of England again. Giving the children a new setting to learn in has had a big impact on their motivation. Working amongst natural surroundings has enhanced the imagination and creativity. Talking to the pupils about the eco-friendly features has been a great way to teach them about sustainability and the environment. The environment seems settled and calm. Children able to focus on learning, very positive impact on staff well-being. But specifically, we're here to talk about these buildings within special needs settings. And we find that these self-contained timber buildings make really special spaces for special needs for a number of reasons. They provide privacy, security, and peaceful surroundings. So the bespoke design means that layouts can be tailored with small breakout rooms, treatment rooms, sensory rooms. You can have adaptable partitions. You can control the access, so you can make each of these buildings secure. You can control where students go in and out of the building. You can provide easy access to the outdoors with decking and covered walkways. And the canopies and decking are great places to actually extend the learning space specifically for outdoor learning. This is a research study called School Without Stress. And the aim of this study was to demonstrate the advantages of using timber within a classroom and its long-term benefits to students who study within them. And one of the findings, one of the measures they used was they looked at the heartbeats of students throughout the course of a day, and then specifically measured the heartbeats within the school day. And they compared a standard classroom to a timber classroom. And what they found was that amongst their sample, that those in the timber classroom, there were over 8,000 heartbeats less per day. So the people using the room were calmer. They were more able to concentrate, and overall, that's got to be good for well-being all around. We also know that connecting with nature enhances personal development. This is another study. It's quite an old study from 2007. It showed that children exposed to nature scored higher on concentration and self-discipline, improved awareness, reasoning and observational skills, were better at reading, writing, maths, science and social studies, and better at working in teams, and overall showed improved behaviour. And to quote Andrew Coley, a lecturer in special education, giving SEN students that feeling of space and the sensory stimulation that comes with being outdoors is absolutely vital. So again, coming back to our customer research, we've seen a big improvement of their behaviour, and they are much calmer, something that we think might be due to the natural light they have, which was not available in the previous room. This is a special needs setting at Rosendale. Our pupils feel valued and like the roominess and light of their new learning space. The cedar building also has a warmth that is hard to put into words, but basically they feel comfortable. It's such a calming environment, and I've noticed that the students are much calmer and more engaged. They like the structure of the room. Low stimulus really works for our autistic learners. It's a great looking building and fits into the woodland environment with ease. The teaching space is fantastic and really well designed. The hot and cold air conditioning benefits our students in all conditions. It has a great feeling of space and is light and airy, giving our students a calming space to learn. You'll hear more from Jayne at Pettypool in the Q&A later. This is a building specifically for special needs on a primary school. We need to provide an extra space for our children who have particular needs, enabling us to withdraw these children for short periods and then reintegrate them into class. The additional space will ease the load on our present accommodation and provide opportunities for greater small group working. So I've talked about the natural design of the buildings and how they can specifically benefit in special needs settings. But there are other benefits to this style of building design as well, which I'll just touch on before going to the Q&A. First is that these buildings can go up more quickly than traditional construction. So the speedy off-site construction using the sustainable materials actually saves you time and it saves energy. So if you look at a traditional classroom build throughout the stages, the difference really with a sectional modular build as this is, as opposed to the volumetric modular buildings that you might be familiar with as well. This is a modular process that we use here. So part of the fabric is constructed off-site and then it's assembled on-site. So what you can see here is that when we're undertaking the site preparation and groundwork, we're also underway with the frame construction and manufacturing the components of the building. So they can all be brought onto site securely. They can be kept in the factory to be kept dry until they're needed. They're assembled on site more quickly, and that means that the on-site, the time on site is much less. There's less energy in transportation and wastage, and also there's less disruption to the educational site itself because it can be contained more easily because deliveries can be managed much more in a much more controlled way, and the site can be cordoned off effectively. And timber is fantastic as a construction material. You know, it's the oldest construction material known to man. And when you look at the amount of CO2 produced for alternative construction materials like steel and concrete, timber really performs well. And in fact, timber actually has a net negative CO2 output versus steel and concrete by quite a significant margin. And if you look over the course of the carbon life cycle, if you like, comparing timber to concrete, we can see that timber, even if at the end of its life you burn it to reclaim the energy, it performs significantly better than concrete by a factor of 10 almost. And obviously a lot of that timber can be recycled and reused. And you know, it's also important to remember that timber is less polluting than alternatives. So less polluting to water, obviously less fossil fuel consumption, and less potential for creating smog versus concrete and steel. So we're on a path as a business to net zero. We're doing that by use of timber and the carbon store effect, removing concrete wherever we can through using helical piles. We have a fabric first approach to make sure that the fabric we're using in the building is highly energy efficient and from sustainable sources. Use of renewables to provide power and heat where we can with solar, PV and air source heat pumps. Replacing all carbon intensive products and producing a really high air tightness. And that allows the delivery of buildings that are zero carbon in the building life cycle. We also have a carbon offsetting, well, this is a tree planting program primarily designed really to engage students in sustainability and the environment, but it also has the benefit of offsetting a proportion of the carbon created through the building, through the construction of these buildings. In this particular a scheme that we provide for our customers, we provide them with trees that the students can go and track and chat to, so they really get to understand the importance of trees on the environment and actually the importance of this scheme on the farmers and their families who are sustained through this programme. Important to remember that in commercial buildings, the actual energy used in construction is a relatively small part of the overall energy of the building use. So the amount used in lighting and hot water and cooling and heating is the more significant part over the life cycle of the building. So it really is important to think about building in energy efficient measures when designing buildings for the long term. And this is a study that's been done partly with Passive House Trust and Ruth Butler Architects. And what this has shown is that if you invest a relatively small amount additional in energy saving features in a building during its construction, the saving and operation can be significant. So when thinking about buildings, we should have a responsibility for the lives of the generations to come. We should think about the long-term energy use and not just the energy use in its construction. So again, coming back to our customer research, you're in effect getting a permanent building for half the cost of bricks and mortar. That, coupled with the fact that the building would blend into the natural surroundings at the rear of the school and that it was an out-of-the-box solution, made the decision an easy one. And these energy efficient features that I mentioned really help reduce running costs. That's the use of smart lighting, solar PV, sun pipes, living roofs that can help water run off, adaptive ventilation, air source heating and hot water. And that ultimately allows you to design a building, the delivery buildings that are zero carbon in operation. So really getting down to the minimum cost of energy that you can have in a building. And that's important for the school because it saves energy costs, but it also has some implications for students as well. So both children and staff have really enjoyed working in this lovely new classroom with easy access to the outdoors for play. A welcome bonus is that we have saved significantly on energy costs. So customers see the big difference in energy savings on buildings like these. The clever features of the building have greatly reduced our energy bills and are easy to take care of. We're able to use elements of eco-friendly design to teach our children about environmental citizenship. And I think we have a responsibility for future generations to educate them in this area, and these buildings can help. And just to finish off before we hand over to the Q&A, just something to bear in mind is there are some additional financial benefits of a self-contained eco building like this. A separate building, standing alone, provides a number of advantages. It provides a bit more flexibility. So where you have certain activities, you could use just that building and not your main building. You can adapt the building with adaptable partitions inside. It allows out-of-hours access, so you don't have to heat the main building or light it. You can still have groups meeting after hours. It has separate heating and security, so again, that gives you a degree of more control. And also, using the building can avoid disruption in other parts of the school. So a lot of our buildings are used for teacher training, for example, so that teachers from other sites can come in and be trained without disrupting the main school. And you can also generate additional revenue from training, community groups, early years provision, meeting space, and hiring out these buildings. And it can provide access to new grants, like grants for training or sports. And also, just to make the point that as a business, we've always felt it important to provide a free design service, so that if you have a building in mind, we can create the plans and designs for you, which not only allows you to see how the building is going to feel when it's finished, but it also helps to support any funding bids at no cost. So just to sum up, really, TG Escapes, we have an educational mission, which we want to invest in the future of our children and society and the planet by providing education with buildings that connect to nature, improving educational outcomes and mental well-being. They help save energy, so energy costs are reallocated to education. They're cheaper and quicker and less disruptive to build. And we're planting forests on behalf of our customers to engage students in sustainability and to offset a proportion of their carbon footprint. And we're working towards being a net zero company as soon as feasibly possible. Just to say, there are a couple of videos on the Festival of Learning Spaces on demand area on the website that you might be interested in looking at, specifically around special needs. So there's one from Swalcliffe Park. Kiran will be joining us in a minute for the Q&A. They have a performing arts studio up at the moment. They're about to have a second building. And a second one, the Shires at Oakham, where they have a building with classrooms and treatment rooms that you might also be interested in watching. So that's enough from me. I think the best way to really understand the impact of these buildings on special needs settings is to hear from the people that are using them day in, day out. So I'd like to say a really big thank you to Kiran, Jayne and Matt for joining us today. And James is going to chair a Q&A with them. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mark. So also wanted to take this opportunity actually to thank the TG Escapes team, because without their support, this festival and a lot of other things that we do as a business wouldn't be able to take place. And Matt Gill and his team have supported Education Estates and the festival for many years now, and we're very appreciative of the support they give. And any of the videos that you would like to see, I'll post, but they're all available on the website. And there's sort of about 10 or 12 on-demand videos to watch. So we've got the three sort of panelists up here. So welcome, hi. So this sort of part is a sort of a Q&A facilitated by myself, and the panelists are very happy to sort of take questions after sort of 5 questions that I have for them. So before asking each one of them, don't worry, it's not question time. It's so to set the context, our guest panelists all needed extra space, and their buildings were completed or designs finalised pre-COVID. Swalcliffe Park School have one eco building in use for performing arts and one currently in planning to build breakout spaces. Firstly, could you introduce yourselves and very briefly and talk us a little bit about your settings, and then I will then sort of go into asking some questions from my perspective. So Kiran, if you could go first.
Yes, indeed. Good afternoon, everyone, and I hope everybody can hear me nice and clearly. Thanks to Mark and the team for inviting us to participate in this. It's my first webinar, so very exciting. So Swalcliffe Park School, set in lovely Oxfordshire countryside. We're a residential and day school for boys with autism, secondary age boys, working with 20 different local authorities. We're a non-maintained charitable trust, and we provide a full curriculum for high-functioning boys with autism.
Jayne, over to you.
Hi, I'm Jayne. I work at Pettypool. So we are in 40 acres of woodland in Cheshire, and we work with 115 young people with learning disabilities So further education, usually between 16 and 20.
Excellent. And Matthew?
Hi everyone. Yes, I work for a company called Acorn Care and Education, part of the Outcomes First group. We are one of the largest providers of childcare services in the UK. Part of the setup we have is with regard to education, and we have approximately 40 school sites across the country, ranging from sort of 30 children up to 110 across all ranges, autism, SEMH, etc., etc. So we have, say, 40 sites, and we've installed these additional buildings in a couple of these just to expand our needs, which I'll presumably come on to later.
Okay, thank you for that. So the first question is, why did you need extra space at your setting? Kiran, would you like to go first?
Yes, thanks very much. I think there's two things to say on that. One is that as an organisation, we're growing, so our student numbers are increasing. Student numbers increasing means staff numbers increasing, means associated family numbers increase, so that there is a capacity issue on the site. But I think the second thing is, I think what we learned from having the first building that you referred to earlier, James, is that actually it's the type of space that you have. And I think we've learned a lot about the versatility of the first building that we put up. And if it weren't, if we didn't have the need for additional buildings from a capacity point of view, we may well have wanted them from a way of providing more variety of buildings and different settings for the work that we do. So a different use of buildings and additional capacity for students, families and staff.
Okay, so thank you. And Jayne, in terms of so why did you need sort of extra space at your setting?
Same as Kiran's, we were oversubscribed. So we went from 80 to 115 within a couple of years, and the cohort of our young people was changing. So there was a lot more mobility issues, and we wanted to address some of the issues around that as well to make sure that the site was accessible as possible. But again, with Kiran, it's always about ongoing replacing of facilities, and that was part of it as well.
Matthew, over to you.
Pretty much echo the thoughts there, Kiran and Jayne. Really, as a business, we are growing, which is good, taking on additional pupil numbers, etc. But I think that the type of cohort, the changing needs of the young people in our care has meant that we have to adapt our provision and our settings, and sometimes the existing space that we have just doesn't cater for that. So hence the need for potentially additional buildings on our sites. So it's a similar theme, really, I would say.
So to the next question, and we seem to have lost Kiran's video, but I think we should hopefully still be able to hear him. Did you consider extending your existing space, or was a self-contained new building your only option? So I'm going to start with you on that one, Matthew, actually. I know I'm changing the running order of what we sort of said, but I'll start with you.
That's absolutely fine. So typically our sites quite often are turn of the century, 20th century sort of gentry houses, as you may call them, often listed, quite often sit in conservation areas. They are challenging in their layout sometimes, difficult to amend, difficult to alter potentially. And so I think sometimes we just sort of run out of space with what we already have. So we have considered extending within the space. Sometimes that's been possible, but sometimes not. And I think having these buildings on our sites has proved really, really beneficial. They sit within the landscapes, as mentioned there by Mark. They blend into the landscapes, particularly within listed buildings, which is very, very challenging sometimes. But with the timber clad, the sedum roofs that we've put on, I think they blend into the background very, very nicely. And from a planning perspective, I think the type of building that it is has helped when we've gone for planning. So yeah, they suit both our need and also the sites in particular, which is great.
Brilliant, thank you, Jayne. So let's have before.
Yeah, we sort of considered all the adaptations that we could do in our existing buildings. And I said that we have 40 acres, none of it was flat, and a lot of it is woodland that we can't expand into. So we did go to the self-contained building, but also in terms of looking at the space that we utilised on site, how we use that. And a big part of the way that we wanted to design the site was to provide a focus point at the entrance. You know, the current buildings were quite far back. This new building is now right at the entrance, so it's our reception area as well. So that was why we went for the standalone building. Okay,
Kiran, I've just turned off your camera because you were quite a large Minecraft image on I think on screen. So hopefully you can still hear us. So sort of, did you consider extending your space?
I can still hear you.
Excellent. Also, self-contained new building, your kind of your only option.
It turned out to be probably the only option. However, when we look at it, it's actually the best option to go for a self-contained building. Our school buildings are quite cramped in a portion of the land that we have, and actually separating some of the buildings out and giving a little bit of space and room for manoeuvre is actually a very beneficial thing, rather than everybody being on top of each other all of the time. So having a few yards to walk from one place to another, just to put a little bit of separation between some of the rooms, a bit of separation between some of the students, is actually a very, very helpful and healthy thing for us to be able to do. And the design of the buildings allows us to do that, feeling confident about supervision and the safeguarding issues that we all need to consider when we're thinking about the design of our school layout.
Absolutely. And so on to the next question, Jayne, I'm going to start with you on this one. So what were your key considerations when selecting the building type? You know, for example, price, materials, sort of speed, design, natural light, sort of flexibility, access to the outdoors, those sort of things. So what were your kind of key considerations for you?
All of that really, because we are in the woodland setting, you know, we wanted to make sure it was in keeping with our environment. We really liked the use of the outdoor space and allowing those breakout areas and bringing the sort of natural environment in. Cost was a consideration. Obviously, we're a charity. We had to fundraise a lot of the costs, and that fixed cost that we knew exactly where the project was going to be. In terms, the other advantage as well was the time that it would take when we started looking at how it would look. When you looked at that difference in the project timescales of a year of disruption as opposed to 6 months, that was a key consideration, because obviously you're sort of running this operation with your day-to-day operation as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Kiran. So what were your sort of key considerations?
I think obviously the same ones that have been mentioned, but also I'd like to pick up on a lot of the information in the video, which was about sustainability. And we're obviously all very keen to make sure that we're using products that are ethically sourced, we're mindful of the energy use and not just the build cost, but the ongoing maintenance costs. We're a charitable trust, but also we've got that wider remit and sort of moral dimension to our buildings about how energy efficient we can be, and using that as a way of, you know, getting talking points around how we develop the site in the future. And then that becomes part of our curriculum and part of our whole school thinking about actually as an organization, what's our impact in sustainability terms on the earth, and how do we make sure that we do the best job we possibly can as far as that. In addition to that, we have a very short time scale to get these buildings up and running and functional, and this solution is going to do that for us very, very nicely in a way that's very sympathetic with the environment.
And that's a really interesting point about the sustainability aspect, and increasingly children and sort of people are expecting it and, you know, want it. I mean, my daughter is an eco champion at school, and, you know, and there's sort of many others as well. So it's something that actually the learners and the pupils of today and tomorrow expect from their schools, and you know, kind of and are wanting, because, you know, they more than ever sort of know the desire to save this planet, and, you know, ultimately they're in the future, and the generations that go ahead are the ones that need to sort of do. So over to you, Matthew, in terms of your what were your sort of key considerations when selecting the building type?
Yeah, I think I'd echo what's been said there. You know, the timeframes actually on site is really crucial. You know, often get a 6-week window during the summer, and to try and get as much done in that time is really you know, useful for obvious reasons. The eco side of it, I think the first building we did with you guys, I think sort of 5 years ago, the eco side was probably a bit of a bonus and a benefit, but as we've grown as an organisation, we've become more aware of our carbon footprint, and I think, you know, with the additional buildings that we've done, we've sort of integrated more and more the eco aspect, ceiling roofs, and you know, we're looking at you know, photovoltaic systems, etc. So, and I think that we'll continue to do that. So we're much more aware of that aspect. I think also for us in particular, the types of site we have are quite compact and quite enclosed, and so access to a specific site is sometimes challenging, and therefore the fact that you know, the buildings sort of arrive on smaller wagons, if you like, it's a practical element, but it's really you know, beneficial, because we just can't access some of our particular sites with big wagons that you might typically expect for normal build. So but for us, that's an added benefit, that you know, we can keep the build site really compact and tight, and safe, with the added benefit of the short time on site. That's just you know, it really works for us. So yeah, I think those were the key considerations, along with the usual sort of price, etc.
Excellent, thank you. And in terms of what impact has your building had for your students and staff? Probably was sort of one of the biggest questions, actually, because ultimately we build these buildings and design them for the learners and sort of their experience, and getting them to the best out of their learning experience. So Jayne, over to you. What impact has your sort of building had on your students and your staff, really?
They all absolutely love it. There's a bit of a sort of discussion about who's in there, and you know, we'd all like to be in this building because it's so wonderful. Our students really value it. I think that's been an incredible thing for everybody, from the staff, the parents, all our local authority commissioners, that they realise that that's the quality of our education, that's our vision for the future, and the standard that we want to operate in. Our students have found it a really calming environment. You know, Kiran said about away from the main sort of campus, that has given some of our more anxious students that ability to sort of stay calm, have that space outside as well. And again, the staff just find it such an easy way. You know, when you think you've got 10 people in a class, that is a good size. It allows that smaller groups to individualize the work that they're doing. And the breakout areas, should anybody need that extra time just to sort of gather themselves, to control their emotions, has been incredible as well. So huge benefits.
Okay. Kiran, so what impact has your building had on your students and staff? Are you there, Kiran, still? Hello? No.
Oh, hi there. Yes, sorry, my connection dropped out a bit, so sorry, I missed a lot of what Jayne said there, but so at risk of repeating, I mean, obviously, again, a very popular place to be, very versatile, so that we've been able to do some activities that we just didn't have a space to do before. Some quite creative things. We've had karaoke events there, we've had bands playing in there, we've had guest speakers coming in there. But I think it's also been a brilliant space to be able to have talks and discussions with families and professional events where we invite staff from other schools to share their best practice and to look at professional development. So a wide range of bonuses, some of which we hadn't anticipated when we put the building up. So I think the driving force is actually, yes, it's a lovely room to be in. It's a very versatile room. And actually it can turn its hand to lots of things, from creative things, which is what it was designed for, to quite professionally minded things, or even examinations. Probably not everybody's favorite, but a necessary part of education.
Matthew, sort of over to you.
So yeah, so I'm not the end user, so I'm not really involved in the design and build process. But I think the feedback that I've had from teaching staff, head teachers, and the like is all positive. You know, it echoes what's already been said. I think local authorities love the buildings, parents love the buildings. You know, the access to the outside space. We built a couple where we've created play space outside, directly outside, so that's real benefits. And again, that echoes what's been said in the presentation by Mark. So yeah, feedback to me from the buildings that we've done is all really positive, just around the things that have already been talked about, to be fair.
Okay. And sort of what advice would you give any sort of provider or special needs education looking for additional sort of space? Kiran, I'm going to ask you first that question, actually. So what advice would you give any provider or special educational needs sort of setting? Are you there? No. Matthew, I'll go to you and May.
Sorry, was that to anybody who's interested?
Yeah, so what advice would you give any provider looking for additional space? No, we've so Matthew, I'll ask you that question, if that's okay.
I think really it's about the design, isn't it? Really, you know, essentially you've got a blank canvas to work to, and working with in my situation anyway, working with the site team, the school team, just to understand their needs, what the children's needs are, and just making sure that the design is done as accurately as possible from the start. You know, if you can build something that works from day one, then that's absolutely fantastic. So I think for me the key element is getting the design right from the start. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. And Jayne, sort of what advice would you give any provider?
Yeah, exactly that. Sort of spend as much time as you can on sort of looking at what's needed, involve the young people, involve the tutors, because they're ultimately the people who are going to be using that space. But also then the expertise that the likes of TG Escapes have got to say this is what's happening. What was really useful as well was we went to see some of the buildings, so could incorporate, you know, from people who've been through that process to say this is what we found really useful. I think that enabled us to do a lot more of the open spaces, the sort of outside areas. We recognised that was important. So learn from others as well.
Very, very good point, actually, and it's great that you've got the opportunity to do that, and that helps shape kind of your sort of your buildings and what you delivered with the team. Kiran, are you still there? Can you hear us still? No.
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, yeah. So, yes, we can hear you. So, what advice would you give at sort of any provider? Sort of.
Yes, I'm still here. Yes, I think we learned was actually expertise within TG Escapes and just being more open with it. It's quite important about seeking advice from other schools, but also from the team who are design experts.
Excellent. Well, I've sort of exhausted my sort of questions, so I'm happy to take sort of any questions from the audience now, which I can put to the panel. Has any of the sort of audience got any sort of questions that you'd like to ask, either to Jayne, Matthew, or Kiran at this point? Don't be shy. While I try and wait for those, if they come through, at the bottom of your screen there's a call to action. It says adopt a tree. As Mark mentioned, TG Escapes are planting sort of trees to reforest in Uganda. So if you'd like to adopt your own tree, you can do. Any attendee of Festival Learning Spaces can do that, and I believe you can keep track of it, hug it, kind of talk to it if you like, and make it your best friend. So if you want to do that, do use the adopt a tree sort of function at the bottom. I think we've got a very shy audience because all of that I've asked all the sort of the key questions that they would have asked anyway. So at that point, I would like to thank you, the three of you, for your time and input in today. Also like to thank Mark and the TG Escapes team for sort of firstly, you know, supporting this festival. Also, sort of a very interesting, engaging sort of webinar. And as I say, all their videos are on demand on the website. If you go to on demand videos, there's I think 12 video case studies to watch and really sort of see some of their projects come to life. And you've heard from sort of Matthew, Jayne and Kiran about sort of their work with the TG Escapes team, and I do urge you all to watch those. They are fascinating videos, and I've really learned a lot from that. So thank you very much. Keep safe and well, everyone. And that brings this webinar to a close.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Take care.